Hello watch enthusiasts. Now today I'd like to talk about a watch which I feel has shaped Rolex's history in terms of its exploration. Now Rolex is often known for being a watch for those who push limits and try and reach new heights in terms of their field. So in this case this is exploration, and this watch, the Explorer II, carries on very, very closely to the original Explorer, which was very much a minimal watch designed to resist shocks and resist extremes of temperature and weather on the wrist of explorers. On the screen now you can see the original 1971 Rolex Explorer II, and this watch has certainly a very interesting design for the time. It has that very simple dial, which, though simple once one's looked at it for a while, because it has that very symmetrical look, which with that contrasting colour, which is wonderful really to look at. But equally, this dial is rather complex for the job it has to follow, because this watch was actually never designed to be a GMT. It was designed to simply show what half of the day you were in, which of the 24 hours you were in, for the use of those who couldn't see what half of the day it was, notably speleologists or Arctic explorers, where the days are 6 months long. Of course, the dial of this version was also extremely famous and known as the Steve Mcqueen dial. Although, in fairness to this sort of name given, and a lot of Rolexes are given a name, there's no real direct link between Steve Mcqueen and this watch, which does raise a few questions, because he wore a Submariner, which is of course very different to this watch in terms of its purpose. Although that said, today they do resemble each other in terms of form. Originally they were distinctly different watches, and even today they do still fulfill extremely different and contrasting purposes. Due to the fact that lume could be damaged if it was placed on the bezel, this dial was actually designed so that you could see the intervals between the hours, which of course were individual hours because of the doubling of the number of hours between markings on the 24-hour scale, which of course you couldn't see if you were in the dark. The handset on the reference 1655 was also a very interesting setup. Now these hands are unlike anything seen from Rolex before or really after, because they're these simple straight loomed hands which are painted black at their centre to make them more legible and separate them from the centre of the dial, and make them far more like an instrument gauge than a watch. Of course, the second hand also changed quite a lot, because the original didn't have any lume or the second dot at the back end of the hand, which of course made it less legible, and they were quite rare, and they still are very rare these days, hence their increased price. As legibility was paramount, the 24-hour hand had to be large, and in this case they went for this particular hand, which was orange and painted very, very clearly to make it all the more legible for someone trying to read this watch in compromised light conditions. This is known as the Frazione hand. My pronunciation, I imagine, is appalling, but please bear with me. But this hand is named like that because that word means arrow in Italian, and of course that is what this hand is. It's a large loomed arrow, which is contrasting all the other hands on the dial so as not to be mistaken for anything else. In a sense, therefore, this watch really is the ultimate version of Rolex's Oyster, designed for exploration. It takes on where the Explorer left off, with a very simple watch which was very resilient to the elements. Here it takes that resilience and increases the complexity of the watch to better suit the needs of the modern Explorer. Also, those crown guards and flat-sided oyster case give this watch an altogether more masculine approach to designing an Explorer's watch, and make the watch altogether more appealing and slightly larger on the wrist. Due to the inherently professional nature of this watch, and the fact that the indices were simply painted on, because applied indices weren't really all the rage back then, the dial wasn't made in white because that wouldn't offer the contrast needed for this watch to be functional. That only came later in 1984. In 1984, this watch had a very real change to the dial design. Now this dial design really seeked to unify the Rolex range under one style, which was to say the Mercedes hands, and that simple baton, triangle and circle dial. In addition to this change, this watch was also available in that famous polar style, in which case the hands were painted black, and the surrounds of the various indices on the dial were also painted black, and the dial was this white. Now these originals had a funny trend of going cream after a while, but have actually become quite successful collector's pieces. Equally, the bezel was enlarged and made substantially more block-like, as were most things during the 1980s, to be utterly honest. Also, the case of the watch was beefed up ever so slightly, including enhanced crown guards, which were designed to protect the crown even further from any shocks or bumps. The colour of the GMT hand was now also red rather than that vivid orange seen on the original. And to be perfectly honest, I liked the orange because it had that incredible contrast, and also really did show the colour of a lot of equipment used, which was this vivid orange. And one often sees exploration equipment being coloured this way to make it more visible, which really does show that this orange hand actually had a purpose in its colour. In my opinion, this dial was quite likely the reason why the Explorer II didn't see as much popularity as I think it deserved. And I think that's because this dial brought this watch directly into conflict with the GMT Master II. And that's down to the fact that the GMT Master II actually has an extra feature, which is the bezel, thus allowing people to choose that over this watch, which I think is a shame because this watch has a great deal of heritage. On the other hand, however, the GMT Master and the GMT Master II could never be acquired with a white dial, and that's something which this watch does have, and I think really does add to the look of this watch. It also is very typical of its time and interesting for that reason, due to that radially brushed bezel which has those blockier numerals as seen in this case, and equally these blockier numerals were less delicate than the original, but perhaps really commented on the type of wear this watch would have, which was a vigorous exercise and an exploration where this watch really wouldn't be spared any abuse. The DNA of this watch was also retained through the case remaining a holes case. In this case, the bracelet and strap can be easily changed and removed with remarkably few tools, simply by pressing the spring bar out of the side of the watch. This, of course, wasn't included on the more dressy options from Rolex, simply due to the arguably unaesthetically pleasing approach of this in perforating the side of the watch. Now, in the 1990s, the Rolex Explorer II was updated, but not aesthetically. This update was very much an internal type of update, and the only real changes were that the caliber was updated and modified slightly to offer better reliability and better timekeeping. But equally, the reference was changed to 16570, and this has become really the Rolex Explorer which has been known until 2011. And this watch is probably the longest-lasting unmodified design in the Rolex lineup, where no changes have been made whatsoever since the 80s, really, fundamentally, in terms of design, which certainly does make this watch a very original watch. Although I feel there are some more references, really, in the version of the watch released in 2011 by Rolex to really update this line and give it a modern flair, but while paying homage to older designs, which of course have played their major role in the growth of Rolex. In 2011, the Rolex Explorer II received a fantastic update, which I believe really brought this watch into the 21st century in a way that hadn't been performed before on this timepiece. I feel this watch is more in line, really, with the original version of this watch, because it really does manifest itself as a tool watch. The case has been increased to 42mm, but doesn't have those very broad lugs in relation to the case which the Submariner gained, which I think is a nice thing because it still retains a fairly simple and classical look. Obviously, with the size of this watch increased, the hands had to be enlarged, but what was interesting was that here they were enlarged in width as well as length, thus giving them a very blocky style but making them very, very legible. This was done in combination with that traditional hand as seen on the original 1971 watch, in the traditional orange, which I think makes the whole watch look like more of a tool watch, and really does demonstrate its purpose. Also, this watch doesn't have that bracelet which appears to be too small, like has occurred on the Rolex Deep Sea, where the bracelet at 20mm is far too narrow for the case, making it look undersized. In this case, the lugs drop and shrink in terms of thickness very quickly, giving the bracelet a perfectly appropriate size and look. This watch does, though, remain true to its predecessor in that it keeps that Rolex Submariner-style dial, with those typical indices, which really are classical for this watch. Now, also, the hand for the minutes does pay homage to the original in a sense, because it has those dark centres with that brushed tip and hand sides, especially on the black version, which of course was the version which the original came in. A touch which I think is most interesting is the inclusion of the orange script on the Explorer II, the same orange which is seen on the Fragione hand, which is of course shown on this watch. And I think this is a very, very nice touch because it shows how the Explorer II is the only watch in the lineup with this hand, and this is a typical feature of this timepiece. Furthermore, the technological prowess of this watch has been further pushed with the new movement which is used in this, and in this case the inclusion of superior or superlative chronometer on the dial actually now has a meaning in that it demonstrates the incredible timekeeping which is seen in these watches. And these movements are by no means beauties. They're not decorated in the same way as say, an Omega movement would be. But I think they fulfill their purpose very, very well, as being very, very rugged, very difficult to damage movements, which are perfect for the exploring world, where a watch is going to take a few bumps, and the movement really has to take these. Now, before I conclude this video, I would like to point out a watch which perhaps pays homage to the original better than the Rolex alternative. Now, I do love the Rolex version as of 2011. I think it's a fantastic retake on the whole Explorer II concept. But Blaiken really do make a fantastic version of this watch, which, though obviously not entirely Rolex made, these watches are offered with a 5-year warranty and a hand-assembled and handmade. And of course, they are modified Rolexes, but they certainly do hold their value very, very well. And they do make a beautiful Steve McQueen Explorer II version, which I think truly does capture the original's flair and charm, while retaining the 42mm 904L stainless steel case of the modern watch, which makes this a very, very practical choice, while nonetheless having that classic flair and charm. So this certainly is a watch for people who enjoy the classical types of watches, but want the modern technology seen in the new watch, and also the larger size, which I think it does appeal to many people. I certainly do like the larger size because I think it really does add to the design of the watch. Anyway, I'll end on a picture of that wonderful recreation of the original Explorer II. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please do like, share and subscribe to enjoy more content on this channel. So thank you very much for watching. This is Arm on the Watch Guy, over and out.